My name is Michael Kopcsak, and I lead user experience design and research for enterprise networking here at Cisco. Super excited to be here today. I'm going to be talking about element management and the network controller world. So, why am I going to talk about that? Well, as you all know, or you should know, that Cisco is moving deeply into intent-based networking. Intent-based networking equals network controller. But historically, the networking industry has been element management focused. So we're making this transition, and all of our customers are making that transition with us. So I'm going to talk about that today. It's a big challenge for us in the user experience design world, and I'm going to take you through some pieces of our story here on that. So first and foremost, I want to start with how we look at intent. Essentially, an intent really breaks down to our intent is really a major outcome in the network. And it breaks down to workflow 1, workflow 2, et cetera, and so forth, to really get to that intent. So intents are significant. They're not small. They're not little things. So we're going to take users down multiple workflows to get to the outcome. All right, so I'm going to make this real for you. I'm going to talk about a specific example. So let's talk about the outcome of enabling software-defined access. We inside call that SDA. It's a major piece of our Cisco DNA Center story, and it really breaks down to these workflows. So the customer has to have a clear understanding of the workflows they have to do to get to that major outcome. And if you think back historically, software-defined access is a new offering for us, but if you were to do similar type motions historically in the network, it would really involve a lot of command line interaction. So very onerous, very element driven, meaning you have to do a lot of repetitive actions. In our world, and in the world we're trying to create, we're trying to make those streamlined and create a lot of efficiencies for users. Okay, so I'm going to double click on what we mean by workflows. So I've told you about intents, break down to individual workflows. Those workflows get you to the outcome. So we internally have been talking about what are the principles that we want to use across our portfolio. When I say our portfolio, I'm really talking about the enterprise networking portfolio. So all the products in enterprise networking, we're looking to take in this direction. So interestingly enough, yesterday we went to market with Cisco DNA Cloud, DNA Center Cloud. It is the first product where you could see the concepts that I'm going to visualize for you here today. All right, assistive and guiding. Our idea is that the workflows need to take people down a journey. And those journeys, they're pretty serious journeys. They're not, we were having a conversation earlier about the gravity of making network changes is very serious. So we want to make sure that our users are clear on the changes that they're making so they make smart decisions. That they're intelligent and empowering. What do I mean by that? Basically what I'm saying is that if we know something about your network, we set those defaults for you. If we know there's a best way to do something, we'll set those defaults for you. Because we want to make sure that you feel confident as a user going through the product that you're making smart decisions, and we're trying to assist you in that journey. We want to build trust. As you go through the workflow, we want to make sure that the user feels confident that they're making smart decisions, that they're making progress, that something isn't going to break as a result of this workflow. I saw a laugh.
I'm waking up.
Nothing ever breaks. We want to improve efficiency. Basically, we want to create a story where the element management that I was talking about, with a lot of command line interaction, very manual, time consuming. We want to create massive efficiency. So let me pause here for a second. Everybody in this room, in the course of your day, you might get phone calls, you might want to go get coffee, you might have meetings, you might have an emergency, things that might happen that interrupt the flow of your work. Those are natural rhythms of being human beings. Organizations have their own rhythms. They have change windows. They have approval cycles. There's all these things that create the rhythms within organizations. We need our products to work both with human rhythms, phone call, an emergency, a cup of coffee, a meeting, or those organizational rhythms like approval windows, change windows, those kind of things. All right, so I'm going to break down what we talk about with workflow itself. So this is the actual UI that you'll see in our products. Again, this is going out to market literally right now in Cisco DNA Center Cloud. And this is we call this the workflow shell. It's broken down into some very simple pieces, but these are meaningful. The example we've got here is of making a sandwich, just to make the example simple. But we've got a header, progress indication, title, helpful text. I want to point to the fact that we've got help directly in the context of the action you're taking. So in the Cisco world, historically, we create these big, massive PDFs, right? Right, we have to search, hunt. I'm trying to do this, so I think I'm going to search for this. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to look all these places to try and find the answers for the thing that I'm trying to do right now. We're trying to solve that problem by putting the workflow help directly in the context of the workflow you're doing. So if you're unclear in the decision, you can get the context you need and get the confidence you need. I also want to point out that we've got the ability to exit, and the changes are saved. Remember I was talking about the phone might ring, something might happen somewhere else. I might go to a meeting and I get interrupted. My workflow gets interrupted. So I want to exit, all your changes are saved. Like think when you're writing an email and you stop that email, you come back, you want to pick up that email and keep going. Same for our product. We want to make that human rhythm easy to accomplish. All right. So beyond the shell itself, every time a user will launch into a workflow, we start them with this. We call this the infomercial. Remember I was telling you about we want it to be assistive, we want it to be guiding. So from the very get-go, we're setting the expectations for, hey, you're going to do this workflow, we're going to give you content to explain what you're about to do. You can easily dismiss that, move on with your day, never see that again if you find it annoying. But otherwise, if you find it helpful, it's there for you. All right. At the end of every workflow, we give this screen. We call this the high five screen. High five. We want our users to feel confident. The thing I just did, is it happening? Is a change made? Am I successful? Am I done? So we're being very explicit about you're done. Not only that, but we're creating a ladder to the next applicable workflow. Remember I was talking about intents or workflow 1, 2, 3, added on? This will give a clear indication of what you need to do next. But also, you don't have to necessarily do that next. I'm going to also point to, see this little guy here with the smiley faces and whatnot? I'll show another flavor of this shortly, but we want to know how we're doing. So directly in the product, you can tell us, that workflow felt like there was something missing. It didn't give me the opportunity to turn this knob, do that dial. Why not? I need that. My organization needs that. So we're going to put this in the product so we can get that kind of feedback. Our goal in creating this workflow framework is to make everything simple, simplified. Take a lot of the complexity out, put some things in the background. If some of those things and the choices we made there aren't the right ones, we need to know that. Other thing I want to comment on is to get to these places for all these workflows, we're doing a lot of customer engagement. We call that user research. So we're doing an iterative design process. We're engaging with customers. We're getting feedback on every workflow that we're designing to ensure that the values we're putting on the screen are clear, self-evident, and the right ones, and maybe hiding some of the ones in the background. So there are going to be some tough choices there. That's why that feedback there is really important. All right. So there's another really important part of the workflows is about making people efficient. Remember I mentioned that. So we're going to take an example. This is an example of creating a site. Network, site, huge, super important aspect of our product portfolio in Cisco DNA Center on-prem, Cisco DNA Center cloud, and eventually in our SD-WAN product. Human beings can clearly understand what a site is. Most organizations are clear they have network sites. They have different types of sites. Like site type here at Cisco, we have gold, silver, bronze, or platinum. In the workflow to create, for the first time, create a site, it's kind of verbose. There's a lot of steps here. A lot of information to do. You may not be able to complete it in one sitting. You might have to kind of exit, come back. So if you want to take another site online, you don't want to have to go through all that again. If basically the site is the same as the previous one, maybe the address is different, maybe there's some other different hardware in the mix. So we're allowing the user to tell us, hey, I want to create my next site based on the previous site, but I only want to change some certain variables. So the workflow itself is flexible, trims down. So the motion that you have to go through is not as verbose as it was the first time, and we create efficiencies for you, allowing you to scale your network faster. All right, I'm going to make a bit of a transition. I've talked a lot about workflows. Now, I'm going to talk about elements.
Can I ask you,
sure,
before you continue, so you're talking about how you think the user experience through these new interfaces, okay, that you're implementing here. But expert people may be it's like babysitting a little bit.
It is.
And the risk is that these guys, especially these network guys, that, they are.
They are.
They're
I'm joking.
Of which you are not one.
So the idea is, designing an interface that is just a lot of pop-ups or not. So after a while, it's too much. I mean, I would like to see something that I want a simple interface, like my grandmother's phone with the big buttons and stuff.
Yeah.
But also I want something that, 2 clicks, a single complicated, the most complicated thing, and go. And
So
you
let me-
know what I mean.
Advancement.
I think I think I know where you're going, which is for the advanced user, the one who wants, let's say, a higher level of configuration that maybe we presented in the more simplified
They are
UI.
sick of the CLI, but actually not that sick that they can have, all these things nice. So they want everything in a single page, set everything because they know what they do. They can risk to make mistakes because anyway, they think twice before doing something wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not an expert.
No, you're not wrong.
Well, I think there's two users, right? There's the first-time user where this makes sense, right? Where you get validation that, hey, what I'm doing, I'm not quite sure. So this is great. You're stepping me through it. But once you're proficient, the last thing I want is have to click 400 times to get to the thing that I want to do.
Well, I think the other question I would have directly for you on top of that is, and I'm not a networking lady, but I know we've heard it several times that, we know just that a lot of the networking people like CLI.
Yes.
So how did that, in addition to what they said about, you're an expert already, we know how to do this, don't give us all the buttons.
Yep.
How much did that weigh into how you looked at this design principle, that knowing that a huge part of your audience just wants to continue doing it that way?
So I think I'm going to address both of these questions, but I'll start with yours first, because then I'll get to yours next. Okay, so essentially, we're straddling this transition in the industry, right? Where there's a whole lot of penetration on the people who are, as you described, they're heavily certified. Their business is knowing every single knob and every single dial. We understand that. The other thing we understand is the newer generation of network operators have a little less patient with understanding that level of complexity. So we're trying to straddle that line. That's why the feedback mechanism that I showed you is going to be critical to us to understand, are we hitting the right balance? We're also talking about expert mode, right? So I'm showing you basically the non-expert mode. I didn't prepare to show you the expert mode, but we're going to allow essentially 2 kinds of paths where I can go deeper and do a higher level of configuration if I want, or I can keep it at a surface level. The other benefit of this is that if from an like what we call RBAC, which is role-based access control, if I'm an organization and I'm an architect and I have a ton of faith and confidence for the network operator who's going to know all those values, I'll expose them all. Otherwise, I'll be able to trim this workflow down to a series of inputs that maybe I don't have the confidence. Maybe the person doesn't have the skill level or the knowledge of the certification to make critical decisions. So this workflow framework, like I said, can scale up and down, both based on role-based access, as well as our continuous journey of learning about what that fine line is between what's the level of inputs we allow. Now, if you're okay with that answer, let me go to your question. You actually set up the next section here, which is, what if I just want to take an action? Like, why do I have to do all this stuff? Well, I'm actually going to explain that right now.
Perfect.
Cool.
I like doing segues.
All right. So thank you.
Good segue.
What you just described is I want to take an action on a thing. The network has lots of things. It has physical things, routers, switches, wireless access points. It has virtual, or let's call them logical things, like policies, VLANs, security groups. All these different things come together in the network, and this beautiful thing we call the network. People think in terms of those things. The workflow framework will create some of those objects. It'll manipulate some of those objects. But if I want to do exactly what you just said, like, hey, I just want to make a change. How can I do that in this world of workflows? I'm going to show you that. So we're going to allow people to search and browse for them. So now I'm going to do a demo. And let me give you one caveat. Some of the things that I'm going to share with you today are in that product Cisco DNA Center cloud. And some of them are future looking. So you're seeing a little bit of R&D on the part of the user experience design team and enterprise networking. All right. So what you are seeing here, folks, is the workflows home screen. So I'm going to do this demo and I'm going to get to your answer. I'm going to show you the workflow motion, and then I'm going to go to the element management piece based on the workflow I did. So I'm going to orient you here for a second. In the workflows, remember I was talking about efficiency and users be able to pick up where they left off, phone rang, had to go to a meeting, need to get coffee with the boss, whatever. We have those workflows in progress so the user can pick them back up. We're also showing some workflows that somebody else in your team is doing. So we're allowing and fostering collaboration in the enterprise. Let's take a look down here at the library workflows. This is a sampling list of the different kinds of intents that Cisco DNA Center on-prem supports. And I'm going to visualize for you some of the workflows that are related to monitoring network performance. Again, I told you workflows 1, 2, 3, et cetera, equal that major intent. In this case, we've got 3 workflows. I'm going to take you through setting up a sensor test. Pardon the gray space over here. This is that infomercial. Sets the context for what the user needs to do, what the benefit they're going to do is, and they get started. I mentioned that our workflows are intentionally intelligent and assistive. So we're going to default the user into something that we know. Hey, you're going to do a, first of all, let me pause here. Sensor test. What do I mean by sensor test? What I'm talking about is there's these little devices. You probably are, all you networking people really know these sensor devices, but anybody watching remote might not know. But we've got these sensors. You can put them into a physical space, and they monitor the performance of the wireless access points in that space. The benefit is I know the performance. They actually mimic being a client in that physical space. So you can ensure as an organization, your employees, your customers, your devices are getting the network performance you want them to have. That's the purpose of the sensors. So this is a test that would run on one of those physical devices. So the device, from a thing perspective, we got the sensor itself, and now we've got this test that we're creating. So we're going to be assistive and intelligent here. We're going to default to the SSIDs we know that are in your network and the ones that are in high production. I can make that selection. We're going to default to the credentials for both of those, because guess what? We know them too. And this user has role-based access to see them. This is where you get into the meat of those knobs and dials. So I'm not going to show all these pieces, but the user can configure each of these types of variables for the sensor test itself. We're going to have some smart, intelligent defaults. Best practices say we want a sensor test should always monitor onboarding, radio frequency, assessment, network services. And these others are kind of more optional for organizations. So we're going to look across our customers and say, what are the most important things to default to? Again, being assistive, intelligent, and helpful in the journey. And I'm doing that, setting that up.
So I have another question.
Yeah.
We just watched another demo from another team, I guess, that showed how to make sure configurations were right, and also to take specific pieces of the configuration and you could put that into Ansible scripts and that kind of thing. Is there a way, if you do things this high level, that you're able to get to the lower level, that you're able to script, do all those things with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Because, and I'm going out on a limb here because I'm not the expert in this area, but the whole vision for Cisco DNA Center is not only is the front end, but the API infrastructure. So all of these workflows should be available as APIs. And as APIs, you'd have more granular control. So in your organization, if there was pieces that we weren't exposing in the UI, to the earlier questions, it would be in the API. So here the user is selecting across the 2 bands that are AP support, of the APs that are in the network, these variables, the number of target APs to be included, and the RSSI range for each of those APs. I didn't talk about this earlier, but this is a really important piece of the workflow framework, a summary. So let's say here I am, and I don't have confidence that I've set the right variable in something. I could easily exit, go have a conversation with the more senior person of the team to say, hey, this is generally what I've configured. Is this the right stuff? before I commit it. Being assistive and intelligent, we're reflecting back the amount of time we think these tests would take, 23 minutes. No guessing. We're taking the guesswork out of it. And boom, I create the sensor test. Laddering you to that next test, the next task, the next workflow, which is deploy. But let's say that I'm not ready. This example that I've modeled for you, which is the factory test, let's say that factory isn't online yet, or the infrastructure isn't in place, meaning the sensors aren't actually there. So you can't really deploy the test to an environment where the sensors aren't there. Here's our customer feedback. This is a different flavor I was telling you. Not only the kind of instant gratification of giving me the frown face if that's what I want, or the smiley face if I'm happy, we're actually giving the ability to enter verbatim by saying, give us your thoughts. Okay, so let's say later, fast forward in time here. You asked about, well, if I just want to make a change, like let's say that what I want to do is deploy that sensor test, right? I know the name of the sensor test. It's a thing in the network. I can easily go search, type sensor tests, and get directly there. There's my factory test, and I can deploy it. But before I go into that workflow, I want to pause for a second and show you some other aspects of the element management framework, which is we've got this concept we're calling manage. It's action verb. I come in, I've got, let's say, a VLAN that I want to make a change of value to, or let's say there's a security policy that exists in the network that I need to change for some reason. Maybe there's a collision with a firewall rule or something. I can easily come in here and browse my way to that or use the search. So I'll take you down the path of, well, first of all, I'll show you a little bit. What we're trying to do is aggregate all the things in the network by sites. So in this organization, 25 sites and 2 fabrics. And then the breakdown of all those elements are available here. At a glance, I can see the totality of things, elements, in my network. So I can browse to it, or I can search for it. Whether it be I want to put in a MAC address to find a specific device, or if I want to use a logical name like name of policy. You can see the types of objects or things or elements that you can manage through our product. We surface the number, and you can set favorites to say, hey, these are things that I work with all the time. I'm a wireless guy or gal, and I manage the wireless infrastructure. So what matters most to me is the wireless infrastructure. So I'm going to favorite that, create an efficiency. Let's go into our sensor test. Let's go do the deploy. So again, the motion of deploying comes up with a commercial. Again, if I do this all the time, I'm not going to see this infomercial because I'm just going to dismiss it and get straight into the interaction. So here, I'm going to make selections of my sites. In this case, Iowa. And then I'm going to have some choices on the schedule. I can do it periodic, scheduled, or continuous. If you recall, the workflow summary said 23 minutes for this test. So we've defaulted to an interval of 30 minutes, thinking that 7-minute buffer is probably smart. I get my summary, my locations. It's periodic. The interval's 30 minutes. And I can deploy it to the location. I get the high five screen. No doubt, no uncertainty, no ambiguity. The feedback is there instantly. I'm done. I'm successful. Okay, let's go back to our deck. Okay, I'm just about to end here. In the user experience world, we talk to customers all the time. And that's why I was so excited to have the opportunity to engage with you guys today. Our goal is to keep a clear focus on the customer outcomes. And what we're looking for in this tricky space of intent-based networking and element management is when we have those workflows to enable the larger intents as well as the smaller motions. If you go from Cisco DNA Center on-prem to our SD-WAN product, that framework will be continuous. So the motions will be similar. You don't have to relearn the product. You just know how it works. There's workflows and there's element management. And And last on the element management, it's really about exactly your question, finding things, taking action. So search, super important, being confident that we have the right framework for browsing and monitoring how people are interacting with the UI will be critical in our ability to be successful there. And that's it. Thank you. You have a question?
Actually, I've got an itch.
Okay.
Your abuse of vertical space drives me bananas. You're wasting vertical screen space. Like, Navy boys just arrived in town and can't wait to get the trunk.
And
It
no
just-
dark
it just
mode.
drives me insane. All that. I mean,
And
that
he's
might be
off.
me, and I survived 25 years of enterprise IT, and it may well be that I'm not the target market for this, but that having to scroll up and down on the screen is evil. It's just annoying as when you've got to do this 40 times a day. I think I like the whole intent. I like the focus on the outcomes. I like the interface. It needs a dark mode. That white is all wrong. This is 2019.
I agree with you.
Dark mode.
Yes,
you.
I agree.
I like the fonts. I like the styling. I disagree with the toolbar at the bottom. I'd rather see that at the top, but stylistic arguments. But the more abuse of white space and just saying that there's an infinite scroll, we've got to use scrolling, that's just bad.
Focus on the words he said. I like the font. You have no idea how big a deal that is.
Okay, a couple years ago when we engaged in the same forum, you said the fonts were too small, so it was good that
Yeah.
we made some progress on that for you. So.
Yeah. I'm very used to seeing a lot of data on the screen.
Yes.
I think most network engineers or most IT infrastructure people
Yes.
are used to seeing it. And when you show it to me, that looks kind of childish.
Oversimplified.
Oversimplified.
But Greg,
And it-
he's the user experience designer, not the user interface designer. That's a different.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just
What I would like to say is, what I didn't show you is the data-intensive screens.
Right.
You know, our screens around network performance, the assurance and analytics.
Workflow
So
stuff.
those screens have a lot more
Yeah.
data in them, right? So I showed you a very simple workflow, right? There's a lot of other more complex workflows. I think there was one that was pretty easy to get through. I could have showed you the site creation
No, that's fine,
workflow.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your point is valid,
Yeah.
that we have to be mindful of, you know, how much data we put on screens. Is it consumable? Is it easy to understand? Is there a logical break point if I don't know something?
where you could have gone horizontal, you went vertical.
We did.
And we live in screens that are portrait, that are landscape, like they're 16 by 9, and you're treating them like they're 9 by 16.
We just did a user research study to try and ascertain the screen resolution on our average users. So we're being mindful of finding data.
Anyway,
to
just some
inform
feedback.
that. Yeah, it's good
I
feedback.
don't want to belabor the point.
No, thank you.
I guess just as someone who uses these specific products, DNA Center, and we talk about a vManage or any of the other products you have that are controller-based products,
Right.
and seeing this like kind of like next generation in DNA Center, I'm kind of at a loss, right, of like getting from start to finish. There were lots of like little components of what I consider a build, whereas like the previous was like a broad general workflow. I understand it's a little overwhelming, so I'm talking about user experience here in the sense of I'm going to start here, I have to plan, and then I have to provision, and then I have to design, or you know what I'm saying? Like those were the overall workflow steps.
Yeah.
Here, these were far more narrow. They felt like this was something that we would do after this thing's all deployed already, and we're going to add something else to it. And so I guess my concern on this is that there's a lot of assumptions being made, I think is really what it comes down to, about what the intent of the operator really is. And I think that you're answering questions that I'm not sure are my questions as someone who operates the system. And so when I get there and I look at the screen that you just presented, I don't see that as a step forward. I mean, I'm just being honest with you as I'm looking at that. Like, again, the idea is yes.
Yes.
But I feel like that's like day 2, day 3 operations. That would be a better than what I see for day 1. But where do you draw that line, and how do you?
So do you remember the site provisioning workflow that I had, that I showed that was long? Like, so your point is, have you taken the experience so in such small bite-sized chunks that there's so many bite-sized chunks that I have to eat so much? Is basically how I'm interpreting your
To
question.
some degree, I think really what it comes down to is that when you start out to provisioning one of these systems from scratch,
Yes.
you are building the whole environment.
That's
so
right.
you're going to have to touch all of these workflows.
That's right.
I don't want to touch them one at a time because they all interact with each other. There's a process, like almost like a checklist, ordered list of things that need to be done.
exactly.
And I didn't see that here.
Yep.
Whereas I felt like the previous DNA center like kind of gave you that. You went from left to right. You know what I'm saying? You did these things here to find your objects. You went to the next tab. You did these things. You went to this and did these tabs. By the time you got to provision, you were actually getting stuff out on the network, and the next step was assurance. Right? Like, so like everything felt like it had an order and that there was some sort of structure to it. This looked like a bunch of like little itty bitty tasks that needed to be done without any particular order or structure.
So from a day zero perspective,
Yep.
let's talk about like monitoring a production site. That's the major intent that we have. So in that case, what we're trying to do is give the user the first time entry to say, I have a clear understanding of the workflows I have to go through. I didn't show you that here, but that is something we're working on. So if you're doing those major motions, like I got a brand new network site that I'm going to monitor from scratch, there's a lot of work you have to do across the infrastructure.
Right.
So in that case, we've got a more verbose workflow or series of workflows, but we're being upfront. Hey, to get to that outcome, you got to do these 4 workflows, and we recommend you do them in those order.
So you have that. We just didn't see it.
I just
today.
didn't show it.
Okay, then you can disregard what I said.
But it's a great point because something like software-defined access is incredibly complex.
Right, there's a lot of parts and pieces, and they have to be done in the correct order.
Exactly.
Right, because you're building upon foundational components.
Yes.
Like as we talk and get into intent-based network, you're building those very base level elements first.
Yes.
So that we can take it up to do broad level elements next.
Right.
Then we can start applying it to policy and apply a policy to a topology.
You're right.
Right, and so like there's a structure and an order, and it has to be done a particular way, and you're kind of left on your own to figure out what that is, unless there's some guidance within the system itself.
Which is the problem we're trying to solve.
Okay.
Right, because they feel kind of like wizards, right? Especially with the little pictures. They feel like wizards to kind of guide you through the process and
Well, but
and
each
push you out the other
individual
side.
action feels that way.
But you only use the config wizard the first time you boot the product up, right? Or the first time you do something, and then after that you're like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. That said, and yeah, the fonts are nice. I like the idea. Is this now your UX work? Is this just for DNA Center, or are you creating more of a general design language that is planned to be applied across a broader set of products?
Yes. The latter.
Yay!
Yeah.
Because that would be nice. Because I mean, as engineers, we suck at UI, UX, because it's just reality. So I'll take that as an extreme positive. And I know there was some foray into gamification as well at one point, and I'm pleased to see that appears to have bitten the dust hard. So good. Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
So yeah, but no, I like the continuing efforts with the clean interface, and as Greg said, maybe a little bit much on the white space, but definitely good steps. And
Thank you.
And I'm glad that the position's there and the efforts being made to tidy up what nerds would otherwise do on their own unchecked. So.
Well, thank you guys. I'm getting. I've got to wrap it up here, but thank you so much
thank
for
you.
the feedback. It's been amazing. Keep the feedback coming to us.